So this morning we are joined by Cassie Childers Ryle, who is going to talk to us about past life regression. And I had an opportunity to join Cassie last week for my first session. So she's going to give us a bit of an overview about what to expect if you decide to partake. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what happened during my session. So Cassie, over to you.
Thanks, Anne. So just to tell you a tiny little bit about myself. I was a school teacher in the United States. I'm American, from New Jersey. I taught history and geography for 5 years. I was also a real estate agent. I authored a book about the Camino de Santiago, and I managed a women's empowerment NGO in the Tibetan refugee community in India for 7 years. And most recently, I became a mom to my little boy, Tiago. But now that I'm firmly planted in Laradora, just in the last week, I have managed to meet a pioneer woman who was moving west on a stagecoach with her abusive husband, a young child in the Australian bush who ran away from home and fell into a river and drowned. I met a retired cattle rancher in the 19th century living beside a lake with the love of his life. And I met a wealthy Victorian teenager who fled from her home in Ireland to escape to the Celtic areas of Brittany. And finally, I met a New York City banker in the 1950s who was about to propose to the woman he loved, but before he got a chance, she died in a terrible wreck. And that doesn't even include who I met when I was with Anne. So just bear with me. I know that all sounds very strange, but I assure you each scene was vividly experienced and so full of authenticity, of emotion, that I kind of remain in a perpetual state of goosebumps these days. So all of that being said, last year when I told my own mother that I was beginning my studies to become a past life regression therapist, she said, "Huh? Don't you need to be a psychologist to help people with their problems? Aren't you going back to university?" And my lovely mother's question was very fair, but that's not at all how past life regression works. So how many of you, I know you're all on mute, but if you can just like high five the camera, have you ever been hypnotized before? Just high five me if you have. Just Anne. Okay. So past life regression therapy is just one form of hypnotherapy, traditional hypnotherapy that you would go to for quitting smoking or losing weight or any number of problems. It's just one kind of subset of that kind of therapy. And in hypnotherapy, the subject is brought into a very deep state of relaxation. Our brains spend most of the day in alpha or beta frequency. This is something that can be measured with a machine. Alpha is the conscious mind, it's the doing mind, and it's turned on when we're busy and thinking. Right now, my alpha mind is going. Beta also represents the conscious mind, and usually our brain switches to this frequency when we're doing more relaxing things like meditating or walking slowly in nature. And then delta frequency is when we're in a deep, dreamless sleep at night. So theta frequency is what we're really trying to switch to during hypnosis. You've likely experienced this like when you're driving and you don't remember the last 10 kilometers, like you're just in the zone. That's theta frequency. It's a very low, dreamy frequency when the conscious mind falls to the background and regular tasks just become automatic. And the subconscious mind, which actually makes up 90% of who you are, has space to come forward. Does that make sense? Good. So my most important job as your therapist is to help you make this switch, to turn off the conscious mind, let it fall to the background, and allow us to access your subconscious, which is where all the juicy insights are. And everything's coming from inside you. So to answer my mother's question, no, you don't have to have a psychology degree to help people with past life regression therapy, because all the coax them out. And actually, for most types of mental disturbances that aren't physiological in nature, on average, hypnotherapy and much more traditional psychotherapy. There is a very telling study published in 2006 in American Health magazine. It found that on 83% of issues,
Cassie,
in only 6 sessions.
Cassie,
Yes,
I don't mean to interrupt you, but your audio is going in and out. So could you potentially turn your video off? We just won't see you, but you can still see us. And hopefully that should open things up.
But do you not hear? Okay.
You're just going in and out. You were doing great at the beginning, but now for some reason you're just floating in and out.
You know what? I just changed my Wi-Fi network.
Okay, let's try that then.
It's probably going to work now. Yeah. So did you get what I was saying? So clients usually come to me with an issue or a problem or a nagging question that's been popping up lately. It can be a fear or an anxiety that they can't explain, or it can be an addiction or a habit that came out of nowhere. It can be recurring dreams that are haunting and unexplainable, strange relationships without obvious causes, sometimes just an overwhelming feeling that somehow a past life is affecting them in the present. And I get clients who are just curious, and I get clients with very specific complex issues that they want to work on. And either way, the therapy, in my experience, has been extremely effective. So what happens is once we achieve that theta frequency, I guide you into your memory bank, first to access memories from the present life. And we're often able to access memories even from when you're a baby, and sometimes even your own birth. And then I guide you back even further into a past life. Clients experience the past lives in different formats. Sometimes it's like a movie and you get full visuals and audio and all the detail. And sometimes a client will just hear things and sometimes just see things. And a lot of times people get very clear smells and tastes during a regression. And some clients experience past lives just through feelings, just like this overwhelming sense of knowing that something happened or that someone is there. So what we aim to do during the session is identify patterns in your lives that correlate to your present life, and then isolate the root cause so that you can properly process it and heal it. And then the idea is that the present day problem or issue just kind of withers away because it's no longer holding sway over your subconscious mind. So one of the great things about past life regression therapy is that you don't even need to believe in reincarnation in order for it to be effective. Even if what you are experiencing isn't real, and I fully admit it might not be real because I can't prove it either. If your subconscious mind is just dreaming it all up, it's still just as valuable from a therapeutic perspective because it allows us to examine metaphors and symbols and themes that reside deep inside your mind. And we can use those as a guide to figure out what's really going on with you. And a common question that I usually get from new clients is, so why would I want to re-experience a potentially painful event in the past? What if we bring it up and it's scary or uncomfortable? What am I supposed to do with this? And there's 2 parts to my answer. First, I like the metaphor of the surgery. Let's say you find out you have a terrible cancerous tumor growing deep inside you. The only way to remove it and be healthy again is by undergoing a very invasive, painful surgery. But when you recover, you'll be back to optimum health. Our minds work the same way. Deep in your subconscious, there is information stored that is affecting your mental health that we might not even be aware of at all. So that's the choice you have to make. Do you want to go on living with it, letting it fester, or do you want to do the work to uncover it and eradicate it from your life once and for all? And that's the second part of my answer. Our goal is not to simply get you to contact and re-experience a past life. Our goal is to find it, explore it, and most importantly, heal it. We do that through a variety of different guided exercises that I curate based on your individual circumstances. It's different with everybody. So now that you've got the background, I wanted to move into our case study of the lovely Anne.
Before we do that, does anybody have any questions about the setup so far? Darcy, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself though.
Thanks, Anne. So I know that when Anne did this, we were still in the lockdown portion where I'm assuming you guys did not meet in person. Is that correct?
Actually, it was just exactly a week ago. And
okay.
yeah, so she came over to my place.
It was the first day.
Okay.
It was the first day that you were. It was the first day that you were allowed to get together with friends in homes, etc. So it was just Cassie and I together.
Okay, I
was lying on a bed though.
But I don't really, whatever. Yeah, I just didn't know if this was something that you were doing online or that you were doing in person, or I mean, I can do it in person. I just didn't know, is this something that's possible to do not in person?
That's a really good question. I do them in person. I have a treatment room here in La Herradura, but actually the majority of my clients are online. I have clients all over the world, and doing it online is actually just as effective as in person. It doesn't really matter. As long as the client feels comfortable and relaxed, that's the most important thing. So it's all about feeling relaxed. So for some people, it's actually better to do it online because they can stay in their pajamas and they can be in their house. They don't have to drive to some strange new place. So it's really whatever the client prefers.
I think as long as you're having experience, I think as long as you're in a quiet room where no one else is going to open the door, or the kids aren't going to, or the toilet isn't going to flush, that's going to distract you. I mean, the toilet flushing, whatever, but you know, mom, I need, or, you know, slamming the door or etc. So as long as you can shut the door, I think you're fine.
Yeah, I actually have one local client here. She has 3 kids, and she actually asked if I would come to her place because that way they would actually bother her less. If she was out, they would be texting her constantly. So she says, just come to my place, and that's what I do. So whatever works for you. So should we move into the case study? Anybody else have another question? Good. So Anne visited my treatment room exactly 1 week ago, and she was a totally fascinating client. Since it was her first time, we spent a lot of time on what we call the induction. And that's the process that we go through to get you into that theta brain frequency, that hypnotic state. And with each session, we spend less and less time on the induction, because just like anything, the more you practice, the easier it gets. So to begin, we actually started with a series of somatic exercises to loosen her up and get the energy flowing through her body. This is really, really effective for relaxation. And so what we did first, and it might have seemed a little bit strange to Anne, she can tell you, is we did a series of a couple of different sounds. I asked her to first make a shushing sound with 8 long breaths. And the purpose of this is to loosen up any blockages regarding expression that are usually stored in your solar plexus. So it went kind of like this, like a deep breath in. And she did that for 8 breaths, focusing on her solar plexus. And then after that, there was another one where she went for 8 breaths. And what that does is that vibrates the vagus nerve. and it releases pent-up anxiety. And that's all just to prime you for the past life experience.
I think what
And
was
do you have
interesting,
anything to say?
I think what was interesting about that is I've done various different meditative sounds and etc. for just even going to sleep and falling to sleep kind of thing. So I was very aware of the concept behind it. But what was great is that doing them 8 times in the first sound and 8 times in the second sound, the amount of air and breath and evenness was elongated. So instead of it being sort of chunky while you feel like you're losing breath or etc., it got very long and much hollower sounding, certainly when you're doing that one, because it's the second phase of it. So by that time you've done 16 things of that sound. So and since then I've used that to go to sleep at night.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, it's useful for any time, especially if you're nervous about something. You can just lie down and do that for a few minutes and it helps so much. So after we did that, we just kind of checked in with a series of different emotional states that we all experience. And Anne told me where she felt them in her body and tuned into exactly how those sensations felt. And that raised her awareness of her emotional body even more so. So that all combined with a bit of guided meditation, it took us about, I'd say 15 to 20 minutes to turn on Anne's theta frequency. And we got her feeling very comfortable and opened up, and we started to get into the actual regression. I could see that she was actually able to relax quite quickly. So first we regressed into a memory from her present life. Her subconscious took us to a scene that occurred when she was 25 years old with her boss at the time. And do you want to really briefly just say what that was?
Sure. And something that really impacted me then in my life, and I haven't thought of in years, like years, but I had a boss who was a woman, older than I was. Obviously, she was my boss. I would have been 25-ish at the time. She probably was 35, 40 at the time. And we were running, I was working for IMAX, and you know, in the film industry, you have a lot of men and you have a lot of women, so not a big deal. But we were filming in Africa, and for some reason, something triggered her, and she turned to me and she said, "You will never get anywhere in life if you continue to be a girl. Stop being such a girl." So I don't even remember what triggered her to do that or say that. She was a very manly woman. And I think one of the things, and Cassie and I talked about it at the time, one of the things that I think happened is that I'm a very curvy person, for those of you that know me, but I'm not a frilly girl, but I'm a very curvy person with boobs and hips and etc. And she was a very straight person, and I was much younger than she was, but I was able to work with my crew in a very different way and had a lot of respect at a very young age. So something had drastically happened, but what it did do is it totally shifted my world. I really respected this woman, and I all of a sudden lost all respect for her. I had this need to say, why can't I be a girl and be a professional and be successful in life? So that was the memory that we went back to.
Mm-hmm. So what usually happens is that the subconscious chooses to regress to a scene in the present life that will act as a bridge to a past life, and it's usually somehow linked to it. So next, I directed Anne to move into a past life memory. And the moment it began, she got no visuals, right? All Anne could sense was a very distinct feeling in her arm, like her elbow. And she was very focused on it. And after a few seconds, she finally began to get visuals, but it just started off as this very distinct sensation. And you want to describe what you experienced next? Maybe paint the scene?
Sure. So I was lying down. So, you know, you're lying down, your arms are open, but I felt like on this arm, all up and down this arm and in my elbow, it felt like I was getting poked or pinched or mosquito bites or poked or something. And it really, really got more and more and more intense and really fixated on the elbow part, but in the fleshy part of my arm. And that resonated throughout the rest of the storytelling. It got more intense, a little less intense, more intense, a little less intense, but we'll get back to what that is a little later. So go ahead, Cassie.
Yeah. So now we're in this past life scene, and the whole time Anne is conscious, and she's telling me and describing to me exactly what she's experiencing. So you're never like, it's not like you're gone, you're there, but your eyes are closed, and she's just feeding back to me everything that she sees. And so I think the first real vivid scene was you were in a boat, like a rowboat.
No, we were in the woods with the horse.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh, I forgot all about that. Yeah. So she was in the woods with a horse, and there was green everywhere, right? And then after that, you were with a man, right? Or what, did he meet you in the woods?
He met me in the woods, but he was just there. But we didn't talk. We didn't say anything. It was just, there were no words. There was no communication between it, but he was there, but behind me.
Right.
It's not like I felt unsafe or anything. It was just there.
Right. And next you moved into the boat, right?
Yeah. So all of a sudden we moved from being in the woods, which felt more like daytime, to in the woods, but opening out into where there was a river at nighttime, and the moon was huge, but very reflective in the water. And he was there behind me, beside me, held my hand, and then he wasn't there. And then all of a sudden a red rowboat shows up.
Mm-hmm.
A red rowboat shows up. Sorry, I just got a little note that said that we're running out of time. So there we go. So we have 10 minutes left. There was a red rowboat that showed up, and we got in the boat, and it was nighttime, and we were just very silent with each other. I was sitting in the front, he was sitting in the back, and the boat just drifted. There was nobody rowing the boat. It just drifted.
Mm-hmm. And you also mentioned that you were quite sure that this was Victorian times. And
yeah, I saw this blue velvet dress. I was wearing a blue long velvet dress. It's funny. I remember Cassie asking me what I was wearing on my feet, and I couldn't see my feet because the dress was long.
Yeah. And you also, at one point, you knew your name. You said, Elizabeth. My name is Elizabeth.
My name is Elizabeth.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess to kind of speed it up, because we are going to run out of time, you lived in this beautiful Victorian mansion on this river. And then one night you were there alone in the house, and you lit a fire because you were feeling very cold, and it was almost like you could feel that cold. Yep. And you were sitting there on the couch and you fell asleep. And then what happened next?
And then I woke up because the house was on fire.
Right.
And so all of a sudden, all this tingling on my arm became very connected, because it was the embers from the fire is what woke me up to get me out of the house to the back lawn. So all of a sudden, the feeling of this tingly on my arm made a lot more sense, because it's what woke me up.
Right. And the dog too, right? Yep. The dog was like nudging your elbow.
Yep. The dog kept showing up. We're skipping a scene because of time, but there was a dog. There were two dogs earlier. Dog disappeared with the man, but then eventually there was a dog with me in the house, and then there's just me with a dog in the backyard, or like in this big mansion backyard on the river. And the man shows up and puts a coat over me to keep me warm, so I feel safe. But the house is, this mansion is burning down. Cassie actually asked me if I started the fire on purpose. And I was like, I don't think so. I just was cold, so I started a fire. But I do remember you asking me that.
You never know. And so after the fire scene, the next scene, I think, was you were in like a Victorian tea house in a city with other women. And you knew you were like a very wealthy woman, and you felt very content to kind of embody this ultra feminine Victorian housewife ideal. You felt cared for by your husband, and your life was just kind of very simple, right?
And we saw lots of butterflies.
Right, the butterflies. So you were in this kind of solarium that was filled with butterflies, drinking tea.
Yep.
Right? And so then...
And there was a cook, and she made amazing sweets.
Right. And then the final scene is we were actually at the moment of your death. It was some years later. You were in a bed, and you were dying of a disease. You knew it was some kind of a disease, not like an injury. And your husband and 2 children, who you said were ages 7 and 9, were there at your side. And the same dog that was there in the fire scene was there as well. Right?
Yep.
And you had the experience of leaving your body then, and it was very peaceful for you, although you did say you were a bit sad to leave the children, right? Yeah. And so then the session ended. And I mean, that was about an hour to get through all of that.
And it's funny, I felt like we were there for 15 minutes at the most. Like it didn't feel like time. You have no concept of time.
Right. And then I thought the most interesting thing, and what usually happens, is that after the actual session is over and I've taken you back out of hypnosis, that's when you kind of start to get some really interesting realizations. And that's exactly what happened with Anne. Do you want to tell us what you realized in the aftermath?
Sure. So I got really emotional afterward. It's still a very sensitive topic for me. My best friend, Noel, died in an ultralight plane accident years and years and years ago. And he was my best friend. And so we had talked throughout the process about whether or not this man was your husband or whether or not this man was not your husband, because it didn't feel like a husband in the sense of love, and it felt more like someone who is concerned about you, big brother kind of thing. So we really connected some dots about the need of what I've always felt Noel represented for me, which was that big brother kind of feeling. But we also made this connection between the butterflies and Noel and Sally, who was in my first present day life regression, because Sally was our boss. So the whole story sort of came together about being, and I think I'm going a little too fast, so Cassie, you might have to stop me there, about the, I'm a powerful woman in present day, and that this person who tried to say you don't need to be so girly really interrupted that previous life where I was content and cared for and not concerned about anything, which is very different than in today's society where I am a powerful woman who is, where I get to worry and participate in the life that's happening around me. So I think that Sally was a bit of a jar from who I used to be, which was content to just sit back and do nothing, which is very different than who I am now, which is very much in charge. And I think that sometimes that's some of the reasons why I can, I hit a wall in the sense of who am I fighting against? I'm probably really just fighting against myself. So that's kind of the thread that we were able to pick up on a little bit. But I have not thought of Noel in a very, very, very long time. He still comes into my life because we talk about him with my friends, but it's not somebody that I think about very often. But obviously he's still there and important, impacting me.
Yeah. Yeah. And Anne had a really big release. I mean, I could see the emotion kind of pouring out of her. And that to me it signifies success, because whatever it is that happened, there was some kind of alchemy where something was released, and then, you know, you start to see the effects show up later in your life. And yeah, I mean, we still don't, I don't think entirely understand what the connection was, but there is some connection between her husband in that Victorian life, her friend Noel, and her boss Sally. And
We have less than a minute left, so we need to wrap this up before we lose computer time.
Okay. So anyway, I think that you guys got a good idea of what I do. I do the sessions online, but you're all local, so I can also do them in person, whatever you prefer. And if any of you want to try, 10% off for participants today. And just like PM me and we can talk about it if you want to. And
so,
I mean,
does anybody, I know that you're all on mute right now while we still have less than a minute off. Does anybody have any questions? Put up your hand, type, unmute yourself, ask a question, etc. No? Yes? No? So it was really interesting. I'm going to do oh yes, go ahead, Tracy.
I just say, is there information somewhere, a website, costs, that kind of thing, kind of practical side?
Yeah, for now, I just have a Facebook page. It's called Past Life Regression Community with Cassie. I can send you a link, Tracy.
Okay. Maybe you can put that in the event post after we're off, and I'll post the video then too.
Yeah, good. Will do.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I'd like to do another one to just see now how we can take what we've learned and go to what the next phase might be, and see if it and see what it does for me.
It's deeper every time too. You know,
it's really interesting.
You're used to it.
Cassie and I didn't really talk about this, but something that came up while you were speaking earlier today. I have had a recurring dream since I was a child.